Hello and welcome. Big round of applause to Yasmin Mohammed for coming here. And for all of you coming here live in the middle of nowhere in the sticks, out in the boonies in a secret location. So we're about to hear from human rights campaigner Yasmin Mohammed. She advocates for the rights of women and girls living within Muslim majority countries, as well as those who struggle under religious fundamentalism anywhere. And today's discussion and topic will be, which is also the title of her book, which if you have not gotten it, gotta go get it. Yes, a lot of us have read it and are rereading it. Yasmin Mohammed, How the West Empowers Radical Muslims. Since 9/11, the West has been preoccupied with Islam, yet public debate about the faith is polarized. One camp praises the religion of peace, while the other claims all Muslims are terrorists. Yasmin believes both sides are dangerously wrong, and it's Muslim and ex-Muslim women and girls who suffer the most from this dire and harmful misunderstanding. So without further ado, Yasmin Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you, Golda.
Coming from Canada.
Thank you so much, Golda. Thank you all for coming and joining this talk. I hope that we have a really great conversation together today. I'm going to spend some time kind of chit-chatting with you a little bit about who I am and, you know, what my advocacy is all about. But as I'm speaking, I want you to think about, you know, points of maybe that you want some more clarification or points of even, you know, disagreement. I'm very happy and I actually welcome any thoughts you have, any comments you have, any complaints that you have. So just keep that in mind as I'm talking, that I will definitely, you know, I'm totally open to anything that you have to say to me. I want this to be a conversation of us all women together here supporting each other. We don't have to all 100% agree with each other, but we're all here respectfully supporting each other. So I was happy to hear that some of you have read my book. It's called Unveiled: How the West Empowers Radical Muslims. Some of you who know who I am, so for those of you, I apologize because you're going to be a little bit bored as I give myself some background for those of you who don't know me. That book is both a memoir and also a polemic. So I tell the story of what I'm criticizing through telling my life story. So I'm not specifically telling the readers what to think and what to believe, but I'm just kind of like removing the veil and letting them kind of be, you know, voyeuristically looking behind the curtain and seeing how Muslim women are raised and how they live. And then it allows the readers to come to their own conclusions. So I was also happy to hear that some of you here are from Vancouver, Canada, which is where I was born. And my mom is born in Cairo, Egypt, and my dad is born in Gaza, Palestine. So my mom and my dad met together. They met in university in Egypt, and they got married and they moved to San Francisco. And this is where my sister was born. And, you know, it was the late 60s, early 70s, and it was the peace-loving hippie era time. And even though they were both totally secular, non-religious people, it was just a little bit too much. They're still coming from conservative societies. I mean, I think San Francisco in the 60s was probably a little bit too much for most Americans even. So that's why they moved to Vancouver. And their marriage fell apart shortly thereafter. And so by the time I was 2 years old, they were already divorced. My dad had moved to the other side of Canada, Montreal, which is the French province. And the three of us, so now it's me, my mom, my brother, my sister, and I'm the baby of the family. We all stayed in Vancouver. Now at this point, we're talking early 80s. So for those of you who are familiar, I know Golda, you've got the degree in Middle Eastern history. You'll know that that's kind of when the Islamism started happening. So that's political Islam. And that all erupted because of the Islamic regime of Iran. So that was a time when sort of this idea of anti-West, pro-Islam linked together like a bowl of spaghetti started to become more dominant. And my mom got caught up in that. So this is a woman who, on her wedding day, she didn't even want to wear a long, flowy dress. She wore like a little mini skirt. She had her hair up in a bun. Think of a Bond girl. That's what my mom looked like. Big fake lashes. Like, that's who she was. Just like this fabulous woman in Egypt with like belly dancers at her wedding. And she got so caught up in this political Islam ideology that she started covering herself in hijab. Wait, why did she get caught up? Of course, it was a man. So she met a man at the mosque. She only went to the mosque looking for community. She's a single mom living in a new country. She thought, maybe I'll find some women to connect with. Maybe some other single moms are there and they have kids and we can be friends. But instead, she found this man who was actually living at the mosque. That's how extreme he was. And he was already married, already had 3 children. His first wife was actually Quebecois, a French-Canadian woman who grew up Catholic and converted to Islam. But he took my mom on as his second wife. So in Islam, a man can marry up to 4 women. So my mom took slot number 2. And if you're familiar with how this works, it's a real hierarchy. So the first wife lives upstairs, the second wife lives in the basement. And it's very clear. The first wife is kind of like, if you got, I don't know, I've never watched Sister Wives. I don't know if it's the same sort of dynamics, but in Islam, the first wife is kind of like, she's the dominant sort of matriarch of the family. And then the other wives have to listen to her. So she's the matriarch of the wives, obviously not including the husband. And so we grew up in that house where he took us away from a life where I had, I rode my bike, I went swimming, I played Barbies with my friends. Suddenly he came into our lives and he was like, music is haram. Haram means forbidden. Music is haram. Dancing is haram. Having non-Muslim friends is haram. Swimming is haram. Riding your bike is haram. Like everything that you can imagine a 5 to 6-year-old kid would enjoy in her life. Birthdays are haram. Everything was kiboshed completely. So this guy came into our lives like a bomb. And then he covered my mom up in hijab. Soon afterwards, me and my sister in hijab, forced to learn Quran, forced to pray 5 times a day. And as this was all happening, I could see my mom just like diminishing. She went from being a woman that was my mom, right? You look up to your mom so much. She's like this, amazing, powerful being. And one story that really stuck in my mind was my mom loved Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Hank Williams. She loved country music. So we always had those records playing in the house. And I remember as a kid, like watching the little pin on the records and being like, how is music coming out of this plastic disc? Like it was this magical thing in the home. And it was a real part of my life growing up. And this man came into our house, took my mom's records and started breaking them and saying, this is from the devil. And then he would hand those shards of records to us, the kids, and say, break these. And I remember thinking like, my mom loves her records, and you're standing here breaking my mom's stuff. And she just stood there looking at her toes, kind of just like, pushing her toes into the carpet and letting this man walk into our house and break her stuff and telling us to break her stuff. And she had nothing to say to him in response. So that set the tone for us as kids, right? It's like, there's a new sheriff in town. This is the person who's in control. Even your mom isn't going to say anything to protect you. Forget it. She's not even going to protect herself. And so all of the kinds of abuse that you could possibly imagine, right? There was physical abuse, there was psychological abuse, there was sexual abuse. All of it was happening in our home now. And my mom did nothing to protect any of us. And eventually we were put into Islamic schools and we were completely separated from the non-Muslims around us. And that was devastating for me because I grew up walking home from school with my best friends, Chelsea and Lindsay, who lived in the same apartment building as I did. And we'd get home and we'd play. There was like a playground in the building. Or we'd have our little, we had our little plastic suitcase of our Barbie accessories, and we'd go to each other's apartments if it was raining, and we'd, trade shoes or Barbie outfits. And suddenly I wasn't allowed to play with Chelsea and Lindsay anymore because they're not Muslim. And my Barbies disappeared too because they didn't like, I don't know, her body or whatever. And so this was the life that I lived. And I was resentful, I was unhappy, I was sad, I was hoping for the day my mom would snap out of it and we would go back to the life that we had before this man entered our lives. But that never happened. My mom just went deeper and deeper and deeper into this ideology. She became a zealot, a real born-again Muslim. Like if you've ever hung out with people who are just like religious zealots, who are one-track mind, even if it's hurting them, they'll still do the thing that the religion demands of them. And it came to the point where there was so much abuse going on in the house. There was so much unhappiness in my life. And then something wonderful happened. They said the Islamic school did not have a high school yet, and so I was going to be allowed to go back to public school. And so I was 13 years old. Of course, I'm wrapped up in hijab, and I got to go back to a public school. And I was super excited. I get to have non-Muslim friends again. I get to have freedom away, because my mom was teaching at the Islamic school. In fact, she was the head of the Islamic studies department at the Islamic school. So going to school was like no escape from home. It was the same thing. But now I get to go to a public school, get to have like some air. And when I was there, one of my teachers, Mr. Fabro, who wrote the foreword of my book, he sensed something was going on with me. He sensed I was unhappy. And I talked to him about what was going on at home. And because I shared with him the abuse and I showed him the bruises and everything, it was his responsibility to alert the authorities. And so that's what he did. So he alerted the police, who alerted child services, and then it became this huge investigation, massive court case, not just questioning me and my sister and my brother, but his kids as well. So everybody was being questioned. The house at this time was so toxic because I was like, if this was the mafia, I was the rat. I went to the non-Muslims. I went to the enemy for help. And the only thing that kept me going throughout this investigation was knowing that when this was over, I could get out of this house. So it's worth it. It's all worth it. Well, that's not what happened. The judge said, well, this is your culture. This is your religion. This is, how your family chooses to discipline you. And so he didn't take me out of that house. And if you can believe it, the abuse actually escalated after that. Because now it not only was all of the other abuses that I mentioned, but it also came with like this humiliation of like, what do you think you're gonna do about it now? Where are your little kuffar friends to help you now, right? Like, nobody cares about you. And that was a really dark period in my life. That was the first time I tried to commit suicide. And I did that kind of with such a fear, because as I was a believing Muslim at the time, and in Islam, if you kill yourself, you go straight to hell. But I already was in hell. So I didn't know whether I was gonna live or die, and I didn't even really care. I just took a handful of Advils and hoped that would do the trick. I just slept for a long time and woke up really sweaty, but obviously it didn't do the trick. But that's kind of like where I was as a child. And this constant, that story kind of in different ways gets repeated over and over and over again. Me trying to find a way to escape, me trying to find a way to not be so miserable in my life, and then being torn down. Till eventually I graduated from high school, and my mom, and I quote, she decided that she was going to find a man who was strong enough to control me. So the man that she chose was an Al-Qaeda terrorist from Egypt. And she had progressed beyond the political Islam of the sort of the subversive types. She felt that we should be spreading Islam through more aggressive means, the way the first Muslims did, which is through jihad. And so she was no longer into like the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't good enough for her. She's like, nah, I'm more interested in Al-Qaeda, right? Like what we now know, at the time it didn't exist, but like ISIS, those were her idols. And so this was a man who lost his Egyptian citizenship because of his connection to terrorism. He had been living in Afghanistan for 10 years before he came to Canada, living with bin Laden that whole time. Came into Canada with a fake Saudi Arabian passport from Afghanistan. Like you'd think these were enough red flags, right? But he was given refugee status. So I don't know if there's any Canadians in the group, you're just gonna nod because you know that's how our country is. So he was given refugee status and they told me he used to drive the Red Crescent ambulances in Afghanistan. That's what he did. He was just like a humanitarian. Of course, once the marriage happened, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this man was a terrorist. The evil darkness was, you know, if you've ever known these kinds of people, you can feel their energy immediately that this is a scary situation. I am not safe. And as Islam dictates, he was allowed to beat me, he was allowed to rape me, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted because I was his property. And I couldn't complain about it because who am I going to complain to? Allah, the creator of the universe, already sanctioned for him to do these things. And so I had no leg to stand on. And that's how I lived with him until I had my daughter. And once I had my daughter, I was just overwhelmed with how much I loved her and wanted to protect her and wanted to make sure that she only ever knew safety and happiness in her life. And any moms in this group, you'll know exactly what I mean. And that meant that I had to get her out of this house. That meant I had to get her away from him. But I had a high school education. I had zero connection. These are the days before social media. We're talking like mid to late 90s now. So no social media, no connection, lost contact with any of my friends that I had had in high school. And I didn't have the courage to leave right away. And at one point, him and my mom started talking about taking my daughter to Egypt to get FGM done on her. So that's female genital mutilation. And in Egypt at the time, it was like 90% of Egyptian girls were subjected to this torture, this barbaric, basically taking a razor blade and chopping off a girl's clitoris. And when he said to my mom, when are we gonna take her to Egypt and get this done? When are we gonna clean her? My mom was like, oh, no, we can't do that when she's a baby. We have to wait till she's older. We'll wait till she's like 6 or 7 years old and then we'll take her to Egypt and we'll get it done there. So in my head, I felt like I had a timeline. Like I need to get out of this house before my daughter reaches that age. But then I got pregnant again. And at that point I was like, well, we're done. Like I'm just moving to Afghanistan and becoming a jihadi wife at this point. Like I can't imagine being, single mom to 2 kids. How will I survive? How will they survive? Long, convoluted story, but I'll just say I lost the baby. And I felt at that point that was kind of like my message from the universe, you better get the fuck out of there. Like that was the shot across the bow. So I knew I had to get out of there. So from doing the D&C, I went to my mom's house. I didn't even go back to his house again after that because I was that petrified. And then my mom got up, went to work the next day, and I went and I found a lawyer. Head to toe in niqab, right? I wore black. I hadn't left the house in like 5 years. Carrying a little baby with me, and found a female lawyer, of course, because I need to be able to remove my hijab or my niqab and speak to the lawyer. And I said, I need a divorce, I need full custody, and I need a restraining order. I had no idea how she was going to contact me. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't know anything, but I was like, help. And she was like, don't even worry about it. Everybody in the office was like, we got this, you're good, don't worry about it. Go home quickly before your mom gets home from school and notices you're gone. We got you. And then eventually they served him with the divorce papers. He came to the house screaming and yelling, "Give me back my wife!" And he's like a 6'4" Egyptian man, right? Like nobody was opening the door of the building. But I called 911. Everybody else had too. They were like, "Yeah, we got it. We're on our way." And then they explained to me that a restraining order only means that they can prevent him from coming to wherever I am. So they're like, "Do you go to school? Do you go to work? I'm like, "No, this is it." And they're like, "Well, then you better not move from this house." I couldn't even take my daughter to the park because I was so petrified that he would be around. They're like, we can't stop him from like going wherever except for like 150 meters or whatever it was from in front of your building. So at this point, I basically put myself under house arrest. And one of the parts of the story that I skipped over was the time when CSIS reached out to me. So CSIS are like the Canadian CIA, the Canadian Secret Service. They knew that he was Al-Qaeda. They knew that he was connected to bin Laden. And in fact, bin Laden's the one that posted his bail when he was first arrested for having a fake passport. So they knew all this, and they must have been watching him like a hawk because I never was either him, because you guys have heard of the male guardianship, that women have to be under like a guardianship of a male at all times in Islamic societies. So I was never without either him or my mom. Somebody had to be guarding me. But he wasn't around. He was gone for the weekend, and my mom had a medical emergency. And I went on the ambulance with her, and we went to the hospital, my daughter and I. She was still a baby at the time. And when I was in the hospital, these two people came up to me, a man and a woman, and they said, "We're from CSIS and we want to talk to you. We're going to go into this room." And I had no idea what CSIS was. I thought they were doctors. I was like, "What's going on? Is my mom okay?" And then that's when they started showing me all of these pictures and asking me about all of these things. And I didn't know anything. And I shared what I could, but I let them know that help me, save me, get me out of here, please. I don't believe in any of this stuff. And I'm basically in a hostage situation right now. And so they were actually really, really great with being of assistance, as after I got I didn't get the divorce yet, but after he was served with the papers and I was under house arrest, I stayed in house arrest until CSIS came over with a photograph of him behind bars in Egypt. They got somebody in Egypt to take a picture of him behind bars so that I could know that I was safe. Yeah. And that if I didn't see the bars in front of his face, then I wouldn't have had the courage to leave the house. And thankfully, I was able to leave the house, start going to university, got my student loans, went to UBC for those of you who are familiar, and started my life over again. You know, I went from being this girl who was never going to be allowed to go to university, and I became a university professor. Right? Went from this girl who was told your voice is aura, which means like shame and nakedness, my face is covered in black cloth. My voice was never to be heard, to somebody who won't shut up on all social media, whose book has been translated into 17 languages.
18 coming.
18, you're right. Thank you, Sarah. So my voice is getting heard. So as much as, she married me off to somebody who was strong enough to control me, he wasn't.
Right on.
Thank you.
Wow.
And I'm grateful to be here today with you all. And of course, that's what you do. Once you escape something as dark and treacherous as that, you have to turn around and look at all of the women who are existing in the same misery that you were living in, and you have to extend a hand. I'm free now, but I can't just run off and live my life in freedom. I know what they're going through. I went through that and there was nobody to reach out to. And so that has been my life's mission, right? I started an organization called Free Hearts, Free Minds, which is all about supporting people who are ex-Muslims and people who are homosexuals in Muslim majority countries, because both groups of people are to be executed for who they are, for who they love or what they believe. And some are both. Some are both gay and ex-Muslim, right? Lesbian and ex-Muslim. And so I felt like, as difficult as it was for me to live my life and get out of this, I'm straight. Like, I didn't even have as much, difficulty to overcome. And so I felt kind of, like privileged that I had overcome everything that I'd overcome, and that it was my responsibility to reach out to people who I knew had nowhere else to turn. And so that's been my life's mission. Wrote the book. I've got my podcast, which initially was called Forgotten Feminists. And now it's just called the Yasmin Muhammad podcast, because I've extended, since October 7th, I've extended beyond just focusing on ex-Muslim women, which was my initial ethos of the podcast. And now I just talk about all different political issues that are related to the work that I do. October 7th was a moment where the subtitle of my book, I think, really came to life. It's like it hopped up off the pages and it was like screaming "Gas the Jews" in Australia, or, screaming "I am Hamas" in Columbia University in New York, or, you just like the world erupted with showing what I've been saying. But when I was saying it, people thought I was being an alarmist. This is a conspiracy theory. You're exaggerating, because they didn't have my perspective. They didn't have my experience. They are lucky. They are privileged to not know the darkness that I have known. And so when October 7th happened, it's like, now you know. Now you see it too. Now you get it, right? So it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, I felt like this is it. Now nobody's going to question it. They had their GoPro cameras and they showed you what they were doing. We saw Shani Luke on the back of that truck, her body mangled. How can we, after that, ever question what we're dealing with here? I thought, well, that's it. My work is done. I honestly had no idea. It was October 8th. It was like a heartbeat. October 8th, immediately, people were like celebrating paragliders in their Twitter posts, and it was just so inhumanly heinous. I couldn't believe it. They didn't even take a minute to, the bodies of the people who were murdered on October 7th were still warm, and they were already gone, turned, blaming the victims and somehow upholding these terrorists that had just terrorized this nation, right? And so I couldn't believe that this is what we were dealing with, even though I knew, even though I was aware. Hamas is no different than Al-Qaeda, than ISIS. They're all the same. I understand the ideology. I lived that ideology, right? And still, it was so shocking to me, because it's like, as a Muslim, you're indoctrinated into this from birth. You read the Quran and you are taught about how Jews are the scum of the earth. They're the worst of Allah's creatures. They're pigs, they're apes, they should be killed, da-da-da-da-da. You're being told this from as soon as you can understand words. And so it's like the vicious, genocidal anti-Semitism coming from Islam made sense to me. I understood it. I grew up in it, right? But I was not expecting to see the parallel language in the West from free-thinking, educated people who were not indoctrinated into this same hate. Like, I couldn't understand how the chants of Hamas were the same chants that I was hearing in Toronto, Ontario, in my country of Canada. How is this possible? How do we have university professors in Montreal telling Jewish kids, go back to Poland. How did this happen? And you have to understand, because a lot of people really are like, you know, the poor girl responded, I'm not Polish. And I was like, they don't mean Poland, right? That's not what he's saying to you, you know? Like they just, it's like, and I had so many Jewish people at that time contact me and just be like, what can we do? How can we show them? How can we express to them our humanity and who we are, and how do we get them to stop hating us? And it's like, that's not your job. You can't do that. Your job is to love yourself and to live authentically and fiercely and be who you are. Be kind and loving and good and just focus on you. You're not going to convince genocidal, you know, anti-Semitic monsters to not hate you. And it's not your job. Do not waste your energy on trying to do that. But it's been a very, this is why I'm wearing a Star of David today. Yeah, it's just been so heartbreaking. And I, you know, when I was in Israel, I really felt like these are my people. These are my people because these are people who, the same people that want them dead come hell or high water, they want me dead too. And the fact that they were full of light and hope and music and energy while their bombs are dropping on them, while their pizza parlors and buses are being blown up, while women are being grabbed from their homes and being raped, while babies are being taken from their homes and being killed, while kids who are out dancing at a music festival are being savagely murdered. And their response to that is to build trees, or to plant trees, sorry. So it was like, you could really see, you know, how inspiring it was. Because here I am, and a lot of us ex-Muslims, we're just like sad and tired and exhausted. We find ourselves stuck in between, like Golda was saying at the beginning, stuck in between Islam is a religion of peace, and if you speak out against it, you're an Islamophobe, and all Muslims are terrorists, and you know they need to get out of this country and whatever else. So it's like you're stuck in between here. Neither right nor left is listening to you or cares about what you have to say. And I felt the Jewish people. That I was like, now we are in the same boat. This denial of your trauma, that is, I know that. I know what that betrayal feels like. And so, you know, it's been a very difficult, long, scary, lonely road, but we have each other now. Now that it's expanded, you know, there's more of us that kind of, I don't know, we have like a shared trauma together. We get each other, we understand each other. And so in some ways, it's become a bit easier that you can at least have a community of people that you can be like, look at these people they're like fucking pro-Iran right now. You know what I mean? Like you have somebody else that can be like, oh, I get you. You know, like women in Iran are killing themselves, literally killing themselves. This is not an exaggeration. They're standing in the streets, ripping off their hijabs, burning them in the streets as the IRGC are shooting out these women's eyeballs, shooting them in the breasts and in the vagina. That's on purpose. They're not just shooting them. They don't just want to kill them. It's like, no, I will kill your womanhood. And these are the people now that the progressives, that the left, that the liberals, these are the ones that we're now supporting and upholding. Like I don't even after the shock of seeing them supporting Hamas, it's like they didn't at some point have a moment of, what are we doing? But they just keep digging. They just keep going. You know, like the gays for Gaza and the, you know, all that. Queers for Palestine. Like literally in Gaza, when they find out somebody is gay, they tie them to the back of a motorcycle and they go up and down and up and down and up and down the streets until it's a mangled body attached to a rope. These are the people These are the people, if you are gay in Palestine, you run to Israel to survive, right? And how can you be so ignorant, the absolute ignorance here in the West of pretending that this is a progressive movement what was it that Judith Butler said? Hamas is on the left or something like that. It's a left movement. It's just the betrayal, the absolute betrayal of it all. And what they don't get is you're not only betraying all these gay people in the Middle East or all of these free thinkers in the Middle East, you're betraying yourself. You're betraying your own values. And did you think that when Iran is finished with Israel, that they're going to be like, job done, let's all have peace now? They chant death to America first and then death to Israel. When you are a kid in school, like you say your allegiance to the flag in the States, in France, what am I talking about? You might as well. In Iran, you say death to America, then death to Israel. It's just proximity, folks. It's just proximity right now. And not just proximity, but international support. Because you got useful idiots across the globe that are upholding these terrorists and applauding for them and celebrating them. And so, of course, it feeds them, right? But they are, as Jews have always been, canaries in the coal mine. They are not they come for the Saturday folks and then they come for the Sunday folks, right? None of us, if we're letting an evil like that, if we're supporting an evil like that, we are supporting our own demise at the end of the day. So I think I've talked enough. And now I would love to hear from you guys. Any questions, comments, complaints? Yes.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
First round of applause.
Thank you.
Have you experienced death threats and all kinds of stuff as a result of your book and your...
Oh, honey.
I mean, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My first death threat was my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I took the hijab off, I was still a Muslim.
Yeah.
But the fact that I took my hijab off was so heinous that I deserved to be killed. She said, if you're taking your hijab off, your next step is to leave Islam and I will kill you before that happens. Because I will not have a non-Muslim daughter because that's on me. Like, I will burn in hell for having an infidel daughter, for raising an infidel daughter. So I'll make sure you're killed before you become an infidel. So yes, absolutely. The blood of an ex-Muslim person, somebody who renounces Islam, has 3 days to repent. These are the laws of Sharia, Islamic laws. You have 3 days to repent, and if you don't repent, then you are to be killed. And that killing can be done by any believing Muslim. It doesn't have to be like in a court of law or, anything like that. And so this is why, look at Salman Rushdie, right? Look at Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Look at Theo Van Gogh. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could tell us about what's come your way as a result of the
It's
book.
constant, yeah. Even before the book was published, right? Even just opening your mouth to show any kind, it's not even that I have to specifically even say something that is like offensive, but like removing the hijab off my own body means I deserve to be killed. Right. So imagine when you say, fuck your Muhammad, fuck your Allah, I don't believe in any of it, right? And I am against all of that religion and all of your ideology, then it just gets you, much, much more of a bullseye on your forehead, but it doesn't make a difference because they hate us all anyway and they want us all dead anyway. So, you're treading on thin ice, so you might as well dance, right? Just like, this is it. Before I opened my mouth for the very first time, I knew that was a risk I was taking. And it was a risk I was willing to take because I'd been spent my whole life living in fear, absolute fear. That's what it is. It's just being controlled by fear. And it was actually Salman Rushdie who said, you have to make the choice to not be afraid. And that's what I did. I just made the choice to not be afraid, and I just kept going forward. But yes, it's absolutely constant.
Wait, Aja, you were... no, I was stretching. You know, oh, okay.
You had a vision of what life might be like because of your upbringing.
Yeah.
She had a vision of her, the possibility of a potential life because of your upbringing, and how much harder it is for someone who never had that.
Yes.
And yet it's still possible. You think it still might be possible for a woman to make that decision.
Women make that decision every day, but I mean, it's like if the best comparison I can give you is North Korea. Sure, there's North Korean dissidents, but how many? How many of them could fight the shackles in their mind first and foremost, right? And then all of the physical constraints to finally be able to get out. That's how difficult this is. So it's not just the guardianship laws and putting women in niqab and not allowing them to have any kinds of autonomy, not allowing them to get any independence. They can't have financial independence, or you know what I mean? It's controlling, keeping them dependent as much as possible so that there's control over them. There's an ayah in the Quran that says, الرجال قوامون على النساء. That means that the men are the controllers of women. And so it's like you're like a dog in the house. You get to live there, you get to eat, you get to sleep on the couch, you feel like this is your family, but you're not going to open the door and walk out and just like go do whatever you want to do, get a job and drive a car or whatever. So you're constantly being controlled. So even if you're living in a secular country, you've got all of these prisons in here. You were told since you could understand words that a woman is half of a man, that girls are less intelligent than boys, that girls can't be leaders, right? No society will succeed if it has female leaders. You're told all of these things, and you internalize all of these things. And so you have to break through all of that before you can even begin the physical constraints, which is obviously the violence and the threats and the honor killings and all that stuff. Now imagine if you're living in Iran or Saudi Arabia or Sudan or Afghanistan or Pakistan or any of these 57 Muslim majority countries. It's like as soon you could get out of this prison miraculously, and now you've got all of these physical constraints in front of you, religious police throwing you in prison over a strand of hair, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, when Ayan Hirsi Ali, if you haven't read her book, Infidel, amazing woman. So she's a friend of mine and we work together. And when I was on her podcast, we talked about how her and I are literally miracles. Sarah is a miracle. Every single girl, woman, more than the men, much, 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 much more than the men. Every single one of us that was able to escape and survive is a walking miracle.
I have a question.
Yes.
I've been hearing and seeing Westerners argue that wearing a hijab in the West is freedom and choice, and it's only not freedom for women who live in countries where it's illegal not to. How do you share with people that it's a prison no matter where you are?
You're absolutely correct. So she said that, go ahead, can you repeat it louder? Or?
Yeah. So I've been seeing people argue in the West that wearing a hijab in countries where it's not legally required is freedom and choice for women. And so how do you explain to them that it's prison, that it's not a choice for them? That maybe there are some women who choose it, I don't know, but isn't it mostly required
Yes.
of them by the men in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
the believers in their lives?
Yeah, so it's coercive control, even if somebody is saying, I believe it, I want to wear it. It's like having, somebody who is part of the Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints 12-year-old girl saying, I want to marry this man because I love him, right? These are people that are indoctrinated into an ideology that tells them this is the way to heaven and this is the way to hell. Which path do you choose? So that's not a free choice that they're making. And whether you're living in Iran or Saudi Arabia, or whether you're in the middle of New York or, Florida, it's the same thing. You're being indoctrinated with the same beliefs. As children, we are shown a lollipop. And one lollipop is covered, and the other lollipop is covered in flies and bugs because it's unwrapped. Because we're kids, so they have to speak to us in the language of lollipops. And they say, which lollipop would you prefer to have? Do you want the one that's covered in the beautiful wrapping, or do you want the one that's covered in ants and bugs? So, of course, if you asked me when I was a kid if I wanted to wear hijab, I would say, yeah, I'm wearing it because I want to, right? Because even I would never admit to you that I was coerced into it and that I hated it for two very main reasons, very big reasons. Number one, I would never utter those words because they could get me thrown in hell for eternity, right? I'm not going to admit, even if the thought comes into my head, I'm scared because Allah can read my mind. So I'm never going to admit that. And secondly, I don't want people to know that I am a person who is being controlled. I'm humiliated. I don't want to share that. I would rather look like somebody who is making her own decisions rather than look like this pitiful girl who is being forced into clothing that she doesn't want to wear. So it's kind of back to your question here about like escaping. Whether you're escaping hijab, you've got the prison here, right? First and foremost. And then you have the external prisons. So for me, I was living in Canada. So when I chose to take off my hijab, I could do that after I overcame my own issues. I could do that because I was living in a free country. But what if you're Masa Amini in Iran and you overcome these prisons, and then now you have what? The religious police that are going to murder you over a piece of hair and rape you to death over your hair. So it's not that this place is freedom and this place is not freedom. Absolutely not. It's the same thing in both places. It's just how much violence and torture and coercion, right? It's a spectrum. If you're in America or Canada or somewhere free, there's a possibility for you to get out. I knew that I was privileged to be in a free country. But if you're in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Sudan or Somalia or all these other countries, that possibility is much, much, much smaller.
And some families full on force that, like
100%.
Like actually you don't even have that.
Oh, girls are killed all the time. If there was a young girl in Sudan that just did a TikTok video without her hijab on, and the next video that she made, her face was black and blue because her brother had beaten her up because she dared to take a picture without hijab. We have a girl in Turkey whose husband chopped her head off and walked around with her head in his hand, right? This is what happens to girls. Fathers will behead their own daughters. They think of it as this is the honor of the family. The girls carry the honor of the family. And it's the man's responsibility to make sure that each one of these women is covered in hijab. And if she dares to put makeup on or wear jeans or take her hijab off or anything like that, it's like she's dishonored the entire family. So she needs to be killed. She needs to be killed to restore the honor of the family. And then they call it a choice after that. Like, that's just so insulting. The women who are in prison in Iran right now, it's happening. We're not talking about history. We're talking about currently, this is going on. They have to see us over here in the West speaking over them. Who are you? You don't know anything. These people that are talking about hijabs, what the fuck do you know? Shut up, sit down and shut up and let the women who have survived this speak. Our voices are silenced. We're told that we're Islamophobes, right? And then the voices of the people who want to support our oppressors, those are the people that get the
Well, they
microphones.
say that's extremist. What do you say to that? That's a type of Islam that I'm sorry you and your family experienced, and some people do, but that's not representative of all Islam.
Who are
We
you-
also don't hate Jews, we hate Zionists.
Okay, all right. So that's, okay, so let's just take a step back. And this is something that I think a lot of people really just fail to recognize is like, what are you defending? What are you defending? You're defending modesty culture. You're defending purity culture. You're defending religious clothing that says a girl needs to cover herself, otherwise she could be a victim of rape. You're supporting rape culture. You're supporting victim blaming. What are you supporting? What are you defending? We are over here talking about free the nipple and women slut walks and women can do whatever they want and wear whatever they want. How are you also defending religious clothing that is forced upon women under threat of imprisonment or death?
And doesn't the hijab actually prevent rape
No,
for these
nope.
girls?
Absolutely.
No way.
I will tell you a statistic, which I hope all of you will Google because it sounds absolutely ridiculous. 99.3% of women in Egypt have reported being sexually harassed. Okay? That's what happens in a country where most women are wearing hijab. It makes no difference. When you tell a boy that this is acceptable behavior, that's the problem, right? You can cover up girls as much as you want. It doesn't make a difference if you're not teaching your boys how to respect women.
Ariane,
So I did, grow up with family friends that were Turkish, more secular Muslims, I would say. I do have a sister, like a really close sister friend who came to the U.S. to live with and raise her children, and then she kind of was forced to go back to Turkey. She's very disappointed because all of the secular schools have become very religious in nature, and she has a daughter, she has a son, she's trying to make it work for them. So I do see that like the more extremist factions seem to have taken over if there was like sort of an opening for more secular and more moderate forms of Islam. But as a school teacher, a high school teacher in the San Francisco Bay Area, I have also noticed over 20 years that the girls now wear full hijab and covering much more.
Yep.
Even in the past, I don't know, since 2021.
Yep.
They're like 1 year, it's like this girl wears Western clothing, and the very next year, totally covered.
Yep.
Same girl, know what's going on.
Okay, what's going on is the subtitle of my book, How the West Empowers Radical Muslims. When I was growing up, I had a counterculture outside of the door of my house. I could see feminism. I could see equality. I could see all of these things and I could look to them and I could say, ooh, I want to live there. I want to be a part of that, right? What are these Muslim girls being raised with today in America? They're being raised with seeing the hijab being celebrated on billboards, advertisements, movies, music videos, apps, everywhere, every flat surface. Nike is putting their swoosh on religious clothing. This is what we are dealing with. So they are getting, the empowerment is now not just coming from the Muslim community, the empowerment of these extremist ideas, it's also coming from the West,
Because
right?
we're enforcing cultural pride. What's your culture? What's your identity? Be proud to wear that hijab.
You are right, and that is the problem, is the ignorance of not understanding the difference between culture and religion. I want diversity and inclusion. I want every size and shape of woman to be represented. I do not want to represent Islamic extremism. I don't see Mormon underwear on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Why am I seeing a burkini on the cover of Sports Illustrated? We haven't lost our minds. We know the difference between religious extremism and culture. We get it when it's all the other religions. right? When it comes to Islam, suddenly we've lost our minds.
Okay, Lear, and then we are out of time for this session, but we're hoping that you will stay for the discussion period at 4:15, which is in a couple hours, and that way we can all get to talk more. I know that so many women have more to say, and then someone says something, there's another thing. But Lear will.
I just had an anecdote to throw it in because I had this friend who, her parents are originally from Pakistan. They immigrated to England, so she grew up there, and then she came to America. Her mom was extremely conservative, Muslim background, and she was told to wear a hijab when she was a girl, and she refused. Like, she just out and out said, "I'm not doing this," and they couldn't make her do it. And again, she lived in England, and at that point there was almost nobody who was doing it. They were sort of the first people to get to England, kind of thing. And so she really did have a big capacity to just say no to it. It was very helpful. So she moves to America, and my anecdote about her is she's as radical feminist as anybody here. I mean, she's like broken up child porn rings, and like she's done an amazing amount of work about violence against women and all this. And somebody called me for an interview, and it was going to be on like live television, and for some reason I couldn't do it, and I thought, oh, Saba would be great for this, and I called her and I said, hey, do you want to do this interview? And she said, this is like, the year, I don't know, 2018 or something. It's never even crossed my mind. And I was like, do you want to do this interview? It's in San Francisco and blah, blah. And she's like, you don't understand this yet. And I'm like, what's wrong? She said, I cannot appear on television without that scarf. You have no idea what will happen to my family.
Yeah.
What they will do to me and what will happen to them. The entire community will know that I'm not wearing this. They will know I'm not wearing. They will instantly tell each other what has happened. And the shame that will fall upon them, and like just the level of potential violence, because I am not, at 40 years old, having
In the
two
United
children,
Kingdom.
living in the United States. I'm like, wait, this is happening here?
Yep.
And she's just like, you don't get this yet. I'm like, I don't get it. You're right.
Yep.
So I've since tried to learn just how bad it is. You never escape.
Yep. Yep.
You never escape from this. It was so terrifying to me that my friend,
Yep.
safely in America, it just never crossed my mind. She cannot appear on television because she refuses to. Like, don't talk to me about this as freedom.
Yep.
Do not talk to me about this. There's no freedom for women in this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being so open and brave. And you're just shocked because she's such a sweet, Canadian.
Unassuming. Thank you all.